Read them any rule and they'll break it. Read us any fact and we'll share it.
Give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it.
By its third season, Laverne Shirley dominated the 1970s and managed a comeback after some steep competition. The show concluded in 1983 with a few big players missing, but even when the dust settled, it enabled the creation of more opportunities. But just why did we have to say a premature goodbye to one half of the formula in Cindy Williams? Did our heroes ever reconcile? And where on earth did that crazy catchphrase come from? I'm your host, Nostalgic Nick, with a look at both Laverne and Shirley's secrets, even the unsavory litigation that a cast member leveled against it. If you dig our video, please give it a thumbs up, it really helps. And don't forget to subscribe so you catch our next deep dive into TV history. Happy days ahead. Our two titular go-getters have a lot to deal with, from family loss to parental disappointment. The show itself had some pretty humble beginnings too. Before there was Laverne and Shirley, there was Paul Sand in Friends and Lovers, a comedy that ran about a year in the mid-70s. Its lead character was hopeless, and one episode was supposed to show him trying to pick up chicks at the grocery store. But it apparently made him look too pitiful, so they didn't air it. Meanwhile, Gary Marshall had been stewing on an idea involving two women working as bottle cappers. They even made a 10-minute pilot scene and aired it after an episode of Happy Days. Gary himself told the audience they were testing out a show idea and hoped they enjoyed it. Of course, it was a hit. Some episodes later, that scrapped Paul Sand script finally saw use in the Happy Days episode A Date with Fonzie.
This is Laverne DeFazio, she's mine. And this is Shirley Feeney, she's yours, as you can see.
The pilot was one half of the puzzle, introducing the ladies was the other. Laverne and Shirley would get their own show. I Love Lucy. Laverne and Shirley was a family project full of reunions. Penny and Gary Marshall were siblings, and Gary was encouraged to set her up whenever possible. As for Williams, she almost turned down the role to focus on a film career, but she changed her mind at the last second. Having Gary Marshall for a relative meant having a connection to another big sitcom, as Gary had previously worked on The Lucy Show, Lucille Ball's direct follow-up to I Love Lucy. It worked once, so why not try an old formula remixed?
Hey, that's it! That's what? I know how we can make some money.
Gary admits he was heavily inspired by Lucy's antics with Ethel from I Love Lucy. Catchphrase Incorporated. You all know the catchphrase. So where did it come from? Well, Penny Marshall says it was something she and her sister chanted walking to school each day. Cindy Williams remembers it was Gary Marshall who told his sister, quote, "Teach Cindy that little ditty you used to do on the way to school. We'll shoot that." The phrase itself is actually Yiddish. They walk to school with their arms linked, counting their steps like that. Not suitable for all ages. Back in their happy days, the joke for Laverne and Shirley was their experience. A free-going lifestyle that pretty much meant sleeping around.
We heard what a fun date you all. I know I'm fun.
That was all fine and dandy, but their solo series was airing when kids could watch, so that had to get toned down a bit. Penny Marshall dubbed them, quote, re-virginized. It was a balance of rough around the edges, but cleaner. Leonard and Andrew, or as we know them best, Lenny and Squiggy, also had to clean up their act. David Lander and Michael McKean were part of a comedy troupe called The Credibility Gap, and they played characters named, you guessed it, Lenny Kosnowski and Anthony Squigliano. Once Laverne and Shirley got the green light, Penny had them over to do skits, and the show creators needed to recruit them. But originally they were a bit too dirty. Most jokes were sexual in nature.
He says, I've got a confession to make. I slept with your wife. My wife? Why, I thought she was your wife.
So once again, the writers had to do a bit of cleaning up their humor, as well as tweaking Squiggy's name, as they felt they already had too many Italian names. Leave the Squigliano, take the Squigman. Sharing spaces. Blink and you'll miss it, but we've been to Laverne and Shirley's apartment before, with the ABC comedy The Odd Couple, which ran from 1970 to 75. The apartment got a makeover. Stage 20 made them basically neighbors with the Happy Days cast over on Stage 19, which gave them a front row seat to some intense behind-the-scenes drama. They really did listen by putting glass cups to the wall, but sometimes they could hear yelling without even trying to eavesdrop.
There are spies everywhere, Laverne. From Russia behind the iron drapes.
Trouble in Paradise. Penny and Cindy were basically in their 30s when they rocketed to national stardom. They'd been in projects before, but there's no debate this was the show for them. They struck gold at relatively a young age, and they wanted to keep that spotlight shining bright. Gary Marshall himself would say the two were still immature during filming. In his view, the attention went to their heads, and they treated their colleagues poorly. Some cast members would admit they got a bit of an ego because of the show's fame, and the fighting got so bad, Gary set a strict rule for when kids visited. Only come to stage 19, never stage 20. When filming Happy Days, Ron Howard and Erin Moran could hear some outright fights, screaming matches going on next door.
Well, she said that my remark about his hanky was crude. I gave her crude.
And from foul language to people throwing glasses at each other. Stage 20 was a mess. Cindy's agent stood just off set and timed how long people laughed at each woman's joke. There was a competition over who got the best jokes. To help herself stand out and to make sure viewers knew who was who, Penny sewed that famous L onto her shirt. Cindy had a very specific demand for billing. Penny's name could come first, but Cindy's would appear higher on the screen.
There was a lot of pressure on us. Did tempers flare? Yeah, from every direction.
Why did Shirley quit? 1982 was eventful for Cindy Williams. She got married to actor and musician Bill Hudson and had her first child, a daughter named Emily. Leading up to that was hell though. We know all the tricks TV shows did to hide the dreaded baby bump, and that's what Cindy expected.
I came back for the 8th season thinking, well, they'll hide me behind, sofas and all whole pillows or sacks of groceries.
Instead of just filming around the impending bump, she worked 14-hour days. The executives put together a contract outlining basically this, even working on her due date. Of course, this wasn't sustainable. This was not a contract to sign. So what do you do in this situation? These producers continued the show without Cindy. Penny got Cindy's pay added to hers in compensation for the added work she'd have to do. And of course, Cindy sued Paramount and producers for $20 million. The case was settled, but no money could repair the damage done to Cindy's heart, the show, and for a while, the women's relationship. Ends, beginnings, and renewals. There's a fine line between balancing what's familiar and keeping things fresh. Laverne and Shirley had the unique distinction of surpassing its parent show Happy Days from its Tuesday time slot. But a move to Thursday saw them competing against the Waltons and Buck Rogers. Of course, we have deep dives on those shows too, but the move was rough, and it was reflected in the ratings, where Laverne and Shirley plummeted. It didn't help that the show shot itself in the proverbial foot twice, once with Cindy's departure and by its unsuccessful reboot, moving from Milwaukee to Burbank, and from bottle cappers to gift wrappers. Of course, season 8 would be its last, and its finale served as a backdoor pilot for a Carmine show. But like most backdoor pilots, it never got picked up. We are happy to say our two leading ladies did finally reunite, with a little help from Ariana Grande. The Nickelodeon show Sam and Cat had an episode in 2013 that had Penny and Cindy on. Things had been tense, but they were like sisters to the end.
We always got to the same place at the same time, and we had great respect for each other as performers.
A pair of roommates figuring out this difficult world on their own. It was an ideal while being relatable kind of show, illustrating an essential point. We all need friends. So enough of me, now it's your turn. What was a great episode of Laverne and Shirley you recall? Did you prefer one to the other? Whose career did you follow after? And is it the best show from the 1970s? Get in the comments and tell me your thoughts. As always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a memory. But from all of us here at Do You Remember, we want to thank you for watching.